Hey, it's now 4:40. I'm Kristen Diaz here with David Rankin. So the horrific shooting in Allen this weekend once again put a spotlight on mental health. Often the conversation that has to do with how do we handle this conversation with our families, in schools, how to handle our mental health with social media. But one group of people that often are left out of the conversation, how our first responders are dealing with this tragedy and how they handle their mental health. On today's Ask the Expert, Matt Zavatsky with MedStar joins us in the KRLD Zoom room. He is the Chief Strategic Integration Officer. Matt, your line of work already calls for you to see people more often than not at their very worst. The pandemic, it heightened the stress and anxiety of your job. What was the preparation like for what happened this weekend?
You know, we often say that you can train for it, you can prepare for it, but it's really, really hard. However, with the training, with the drills that we do, to some extent, the field providers go into a little bit of autopilot. The training kicks in, the muscle memory, the adrenaline helps. We know what to do. We know how to save lives. The hardest thing for the field providers to do, though, is to make triage decisions. When there are more needs than there are resources, we have very difficult decisions to make. You could have someone who is gravely injured but is still alive, and then 3 other, 4 other, 5 other more people who have serious injuries who could survive if you treat them, but you know that 6 people treating the patient that you know is not going to survive is not a prudent decision. Making the decision to not treat someone so that more people can survive is gut-wrenching.
We are now a couple of days removed from the initial incident in Allen this weekend, and it's often said that, and just as you reiterated, when you're in the moment, you go through your training, your adrenaline rush. It's not until a couple of days after that you really start to realize what you just went through. Are North Texas first responders dealing with that right now?
They absolutely are. And, you know, EMS, a career in EMS, is one of the most rewarding, but one of the most gut-wrenching careers that you can possibly have. In situations like Allen or like we just saw in Brownsville or anything like that, we've had many of them here, it's the day or two afterwards. And that's why EMS agencies, communities really need to help catch providers off of that high. You know, for 24 hours after the incident, you know, we're fine, right? We're tough. We can handle it. It's after that first 24 hours where people begin to crash and recount what happened. And that's where the community really needs to come in. Their agencies need to come in with the resources to catch them, to literally catch them and help them through the grieving process, the stress. And, you know, often it's that cumulative stress of, you know, your last 5 years on shift, your last month on shift, the time away from your family, compounded by what we see every day, that just takes that one little push to push us over the edge and lead to potentially tragedy, and all too often tragedy.
What's the level when we're talking about the stress levels for first responders? I mean, they're just people just like everybody else. As they're watching the news and watching the situation unfold, we're at least separated from it. They're at the scene. And you talk about a couple of days later how they can crash from it. What resources do they have available to them to deal with that crash?
Thankfully, the concept and the importance of mental health in first response organizations and first responders have really gotten a lot of attention, arguably since and during the pandemic. So organizations, you know, at MedStar, we have what we call our Hope Squad. And it's a group of folks who are peer counselors. They are selected by the employees who are people that they will feel comfortable going to if they're struggling, or they're trained to notice when, hey, David, you're not acting right. You're normally upbeat. You seem really depressed. You seem really down. You're withdrawn. And they can go and draw them out and say, hey, you know, let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's talk about, you know, what resources you might need. Many agencies are doing that. There's a national effort to really begin training first response organizations in mental health resilience, and some national organizations like the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians has a certification course in mental health resiliency officer, and so many people are taking that class, so we can try and have at least 1 or 2 or 3 mental health resiliency officers in every EMS agency across the country to really watch out for this issue.
That is Matt Zavatsky with MedStar. You can find the entire interview at KRLD.com. You can also search for Ask the Expert North Texas. It's a podcast that you can download through the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast.